Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Chania, Crete in southern Greece on April 3rd, 2026 for Reason to Resist. I arrived here last night in Chania from Athens after having undertaken a long and quite tiring journey from the Strait of Hormuz and the Iranian city on the Strait of Hormuz, Bandar Abbas. And the way we got back to Turkey and the way I eventually arrived in Greece was we took a 22-hour train ride from Bandar Abbas to Tehran. First time I'd ever been on an Iranian train. It was functional, it was a decent train ride, but I wouldn't say it was the lap of luxury. And then promptly upon our arrival in Tehran, we took a bus from Tehran to the Turkish border. That was, I think, about another 12 hours. And we passed through customs on the Turkish and Iranian sides quite easily late at night, and then took a taxi from the Turkish border, a 1-hour taxi ride to the city of Van in eastern Turkey, a predominantly Kurdish city with a small Turkic population and a significant Iranian population, I'm told. And part of whose reason for being there is to help circumvent these criminal sanctions that have been imposed upon the Islamic Republic by Western countries. But that's another story, and I don't have enough detail to really get into all of that. Needless to say, by the end of this trip, I was a mess because we hardly slept at all during the trip. You probably see it on my face. I'd probably have aged a good number of years during the past 11 days, partly because the schedule was very grueling. But to be perfectly frank about it, I really didn't want to sleep. Even when I had an opportunity to spend a few hours in a hotel room, I spent half of the time awake and just trying to absorb as much information as I could while I was in the country and share as much of it with the outside world. Because from my perspective, this war against this amazing country, for which I've developed tremendous respect and admiration, it is the most consequential war of our lifetime, and it was a privilege to be able to witness the defiance and resistance of the Iranian people at this critical point, not only in their history, but in our history. So I just didn't want to sleep, and at the end of the day, I probably averaged about 3 hours a night. I am going to take some time to catch up, but I wanted to take this opportunity to sort of give you a summary of what happened in the final days and where I think this war is heading. At least touch upon that subject and tell you why I'm here. Let's start with why I'm here. I came to Chania because there's good reason to believe that the U.S. naval base at Suda Bay, which is just a few kilometers from where I'm standing, is playing a critically important role in this criminal war of aggression. Shamefully for the Greek people, with the consent of the conservative government of Kyriakos Mitsotakis, somebody about whom I have had much to say on social media over the past year. He has not only rendered himself and his government complicit in this war, but in all of the wars of aggression being waged by Israel in the region over the tenure of his government. And in particular, he has the blood of Palestinian children on his hand, this criminal, Kyriakos Mitsotakis. And if there were any justice in this world, he would be tried for war crimes at The Hague and be tried by a Greek court for treason. Because by aligning us with these monsters, he has betrayed the state of Greece. Again, that's another matter. In any case, I wanted to investigate what is going on here, and it seemed like an appropriate time to do that, having just come from the Islamic Republic. And my original plan, to be perfectly blunt about it, was to try to get as close as possible to this military base over the next few days and see if I could document for the benefit of not only Greeks but the broader world what is going on there, but not knowing the sort of the lay of the land here. I really don't know it particularly well. It's been a long time since I've been in Crete. I consulted with some comrades in the anti-imperialist community here, and I was referred to somebody whom I'd never spoken with before. To respect her privacy, I'm not going to name her, but she was described to me as a legend in the anti-imperialist movement, and I was urged to consult with her before deciding how to go about this investigative task here in Chania. So I called her, and she gave me generously a lot of her time, and by the way, she was herself, I'm told, tortured by the junta of Papadopoulos in the 1960s. This was a dictatorship that was installed into power by the CIA. Papadopoulos was in fact a CIA agent and a Nazi collaborator. Why did they do that? Because Greece was on the verge of electing, they thought, the CIA a moderately left-wing government, but that was too much for them to stomach. So they inflicted upon the Greek people a Nazi collaborator and vicious tyrant for 4 or 5 years, and she resisted that, and I'm told she was tortured as a result. In any case, she delivered to me some unfortunate news. She told me that I should stay away from the military base because based on prior experience, there was a good chance that they would arrest me for espionage if I tried to get anywhere close to it, and especially if I tried to videotape, even from public lands, what was going on there. And she said the fact that I had just returned from Iran made it particularly dangerous, and so she urged me not to do that. As a result, I'm no interest in, getting tossed into the hoosgow by this complicit Greek government on some bogus charges of espionage. My purpose in coming here is strictly journalistic. I don't work for any government. I'm not an agent of any government, but that's not going to deter these idiots and these scoundrels from leveling an allegation of that kind against me. And in any event, I doubt that I would be able to get much in the way of video footage and photography from getting close to the outer edges of this military base. So what I'm going to do is talk to people here who live here, who are part of the struggle against the presence of the US military on this island, and try to learn from them what is going on here, and I'll be reporting about that in the days ahead. So, by the way, that's the Mediterranean Sea right there. So, I want to talk to you a little bit about my overall impressions of Iran. I spoke to I wasn't keeping track, but I had some interaction, meaningful interaction with, I would guess, about a couple hundred people while I was there. And I personally did not hear anybody criticize or condemn the Iranian government. I heard nothing but unmitigated contempt and scorn from Iranians about the idea that the United States and Israel are trying to liberate the Iranian people. There was universal derision of the clown prince Pahlavi, the son of the Shah, and really outright hostility to the notion that Iran's government should negotiate with these perfidious criminals in Washington. That was these sentiments, as I say, I heard this from every single person that I interacted with. Now, I'm sure that there are people I didn't meet who are hotly opposed to the Iranian government, but they never crossed my path. And I had the impression that everybody who spoke to me and expressed the views that I just outlined was being completely sincere. Now, one person in our group he went off on his own and started speaking to some people in a shopping mall in Tehran, one of whom was a young woman who was having a cup of tea with her boyfriend. And she did express to him criticism of the government, saying that it was imposing its religious views on secular people like her. But she herself also went out of her way to say that she was adamantly opposed to the Israeli-US attacks on her country. That is, as far as I know, the only person that any of the people in our journalistic contingent interacted with who criticized the government. Again, this is not to say that there aren't people in Iran who are critical of the government and who oppose it, and I'm sure that some portion of the population would like to see it overthrown. There's, a good bit of reason to believe that. But the idea that this is the majority sentiment or the overwhelming view of the Iranian people was not at all borne out by my experience over these past 11 days. I don't have any formal polling data to show you. Hey, maybe my experience is not representative, but that's what I saw and heard. I also, on a personal level, was deeply moved by the reception I received from the Iranian people. There was a point in the trip where we visited a 3-year-old girl in a hospital in Isfahan, whose entire family had been wiped out. in a bombing raid by the U.S.-Israeli criminals. She was lying in a hospital bed with a ventilator. Her face was terribly scarred, and she had not regained consciousness since the killing of her family and was unaware of their deaths. When I saw that, it brought up a lot of emotions that I experienced as I was watching this terrible imagery coming out of Gaza over the past 2.5 years. Seeing it in person, as I remarked in my report from the hospital, is quite different from seeing the video footage and photography out of Gaza, however terrifying that may have been. And as a result, I broke down in tears. And unbeknownst to me, somebody in the hospital room caught me on video, an Iranian journalist, and the video was then broadcast on national Iranian television. And the way that I learned of this, nobody told me about this at the time in our entourage. I learned about it because a couple of friends from the Iranian Canadian community who were watching, they were monitoring Iranian television during the war, sent me emails and said that my tears had caused them to shed tears, and they thanked me for my compassion for the young girl. After that, I was constantly being asked by Iranian media to give interviews. I probably spent about half my time during the second half of the trip giving interviews. Maybe not quite that much, but there were a lot of them. I lost count of them. And, many of them were broadcast on national television in Iran. And by the time I got to the third last day, I would say, of this 11-day voyage, people were coming up to me in the street, in the train station, in restaurants that we stopped at while we were busing to our next destination. And they said they recognized me from Iranian television, and they hugged me, and some of them said, we love you. They actually declared their love and affection for what I and the other journalists in our entourage were doing. And in the course of those interactions, some of them went out of their way to say, tell the people in the West that we are prepared to die for our country. There was one man I remember on the train who was very affectionate, a 64-year-old man. And as soon as he saw me, he hugged me, and he said, I want you to know I fought for 5 years in the Iran-Iraq war, and even at my advanced age, I'm ready to take up a gun and to resist the aggressor if and when they try to invade my country. This was a sentiment I heard across the board. I saw multiple, I probably 15 to 20 demonstrations over the course of the 11 days in various Iranian cities in support of the state, condemning Pahlavi, condemning Israel and the United States, demanding that the government not negotiate with them. What I saw there was a united nation, a proud nation, and a determined nation. And on the other side of the coin, one smells the rank stench of defeat coming from the halls of power in the West and in Tel Aviv. Just to give you a few examples, I've been monitoring social media today. It appears that a warplane was shot down, another one, over Iran, and that one or more pilots ejected. And all the reports indicate that the Americans have sent in helicopters and a refueling aircraft to try to recover them. The Israeli military has said to the Israeli media, this is a separate piece of news, I just saw today, that they don't think it's possible for them to disarm Hezbollah, and that the Lebanese government is going to have to do it, which is of course a pipe dream. The Lebanese government can't do it and won't do it, and the Israelis know this perfectly well. So this is basically an admission that the Israelis are not going to be able to disarm Hezbollah, and that nobody is going to disarm Hezbollah. And this is 6 months after that vile war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu gloated at the UN General Assembly that he had crippled Hezbollah. Hezbollah appears now to be stronger than it has been at any time during the genocide in Gaza. And then I saw a report from an Israeli soldier who was masking his face. I think he was speaking to Israeli media, but he was saying that it is in fact the case that the Israeli military is on the verge of collapse. There was an article in Time magazine over the past 24 to 48 hours, which the headline of which is something like, inside the White House's effort to, extract itself from the war against Iran. And it went on to talk about how trusted advisors of the Donald approached him in the third week of the war with polling data saying that the American voters are about to become even more opposed, and by a wide margin, to the war than they were at the outset, and that he'd better find a damn way out of it. And in that same Time article, somebody who claims to be familiar with the thinking of that sniveling little cowardly white supremacist Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said that Hegseth was taken aback by the expansive response of Iran to the attacks on their country. And specifically, he didn't think that the Iranians were going to attack other military bases in the Persian Gulf of the United States, and that their response would be largely symbolic. He didn't think that they were serious about closing the Strait of Hormuz either, even though they said that they were going to do all of those things and said them repeatedly in a warning to the United States. So now Hegseth appears to be the drunken buffoon, appears to be in a tizzy about how to extract himself or his country from this war. All the signs point to an ignominious defeat for the Anglo-American empire. And make no mistake that it's not just a U.S. war on Iran. It is a Western war on Iran, just as the genocide in Gaza was a Western genocide. All of our governments, and when I say our, I'm referring to my fellow Westerners, are deeply complicit in all of these crimes. And unless and until we remove these scumbags from power, we are going to hurtle towards a collective catastrophe as a species. So if this doesn't get you off of your couch and into the streets, nothing will, my friends, because we are on the verge of a calamity of epic proportions. The other, which brings me to the next point I want to make, maybe my most important point about what I took away from my time in Iran, and that is there's no military solution to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. You can forget about it. The United States, this is precisely why Donald Trump is demanding that his vassals take over that task, because even he has managed to grasp that it can't be stopped. You don't have to send naval vessels into the narrow Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian military doesn't have to do that in order to drastically reduce the amount of traffic going through the strait. And they don't have to cut it off completely to tank the global economy. All they have to do is drastically reduce the amount of oil and gas that's going through the Strait of Hormuz. And in order to do that, all they got to do is blow up a ship now and then. That's it. Because if they blow up a ship now and then, which they could do with drones, they could do it with missiles, they could do it with mines, they could do it with those fast boats that come out of nowhere, zip out from the Iranian coastline and fire anti-ship missiles at these tankers, which are sitting ducks. They're huge, they move slowly, they're highly combustible. All they got to do is occasionally blow up one of those big juicy targets to put the fear of God into the global insurance industry and the global shipping industry, and effectively kill the movement of oil tankers and LNG tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. There's no military solution to that conundrum, which means one thing and one thing only. This war, at the end of the day, is remarkably simple in terms of its trajectory, in my view. And the simple idea here is that the only way to put a stop to the destruction of the global economy is for the Donald to do something that he is congenitally incapable of doing, and that is to make concessions to a country that he has targeted for destruction. He's going to have to agree to pay reparations to the Islamic Republic, which, by the way, is the obligation of the United States to do under international law, because the attack on Iran was a criminal war of aggression. So the Iranians are not asking for anything that they're not entitled to under the law when they say you're going to have to give us reparations. And the bill is getting bigger and bigger by the day. They're destroying now pharmaceutical institutions, medical institutions, bridges in Iran, in addition to power structures and so forth. So he's going to have to pay some big bucks, or maybe he can cause his cronies in the Gulf world, the Gulf autocracies, to pony up the dough for the United States. One way or another, Iran, I think, is going to insist upon a reasonable measure of compensation, and there's no sign that he's willing to do that. The Iranians seem to be quite serious about a second demand that they have made, and that is the United States is going to have to remove its military bases from the Persian Gulf. And by the way, the United States may end up doing that whether or not they get evicted by their Arab vassals, because those bases have proven themselves to be completely indefensible. So they might make that decision on their own. But either way, whether it's brought upon them by their vassals in the Arab world, or they decide on their own that these bases must be abandoned because they're indefensible, there's no sign as yet that that's going to happen, that they're prepared to do that. And finally, they're going to have to give ironclad guarantees that the sadistic, satanic Israeli entity is not going to attack Iran again, and that neither will the United States. And that's going to be a bit of a challenge, because they've so destroyed their own credibility, the Americans and the Israelis, over these past several years. This started well before Trump, by the way, the destruction of the credibility of the U.S. government. Hard to see how Iran's demand is going to be satisfied, but at the end of the day, there's no indication that the U.S. government at this stage is willing to accede to any of those demands, which means one thing: the war will escalate. And my view is that the one and only way for Donald Trump to make the concessions that will be necessary to open the Strait of Hormuz and prevent a global economic catastrophe is for the U.S. economy to be screaming in pain so much that Americans finally pour into the streets and mount relentless, hostile, unmitigated protest and furor, the likes of which we haven't seen since the Vietnam War protests. That's the kind of opposition, either that or, Trump's Republican Party is eviscerated in the Senate and in the House of Representatives in the midterms, by which time the global economy will lie in smoking ruins, by the way. So this is where we're heading. The economic situation globally is going to become dire, and I fear for the most vulnerable members of global society, but I think at the end of the day, that is how this war will end. It will end with the United States making a humiliating series of concessions to the Islamic Republic, and the people of Iran and their country finally assuming the rightful place in the global order, something that has been denied to them really for the entire post-World War II period. From the time that their democratically elected government, the government of Mohammad Mossadegh, was overthrown by the British and the Americans in the 1950s because it had the audacity, the temerity to want to nationalize the Anglo-American oil company for the benefit of the Iranian people. So hold on to your seats, folks. We are heading into dire economic waters, and I think that what we're likely to see between now and the summer is going to be considerably worse than the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. I certainly hope that I'm wrong, but all the signs point to that outcome, unfortunately. The last thing I'd like to do today, before signing off, by the way, I do have one more report to publish from Iran. It is a report about severe damage that was done to precious historical, cultural sites in the capital, Tehran. I hope to publish that tomorrow. And after that, I'm going to turn my attention fully to the nefarious activities of the United States military and its vassals here in the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, the one other thing I want to talk about before signing off for today is the Canadian media. I have some choice words for those motherfuckers. And why? Why do I have some choice words for them? Well, first of all, I'm well known to the Canadian media. From 2006 to 2016, my full-time activity was to prosecute securities class actions in Canada against companies that were well known to the capital markets. And I took on many of the most hallowed names in Canadian corporate history, including Research in Motion, the maker of the BlackBerry, just as an example. And as a result of the work that I did as a plaintiff side securities class actions lawyer, I was regularly quoted by the Canadian media. It's not so much they wanted to talk to me, but they wanted to talk about the cases that I and my colleagues in my law firm were pursuing, because it involved very powerful people and very large sums of money. And so I think it's fair to say, and you could confirm this for yourself if you care to take the time, that during that 10-year period, 2006 to 2016, I was almost certainly the most quoted practicing lawyer in Canada in the corporate media, by a wide margin, by the way. And so they all know who I am in the corporate media, and they also know who I am because I ran to be the leader of the Green Party of Canada in 2020, and on an explicitly anti-imperialist and eco-socialist platform, I came within a hair's breadth of winning the leadership of a party that had seats in Parliament. They were horrified by that, and I've sued the Canadian government in a case alleging that it's violating its obligations under the Genocide Convention, and I could go on. There are plenty of reasons why they know me. A number of these characters follow me on social media, and you know, their willingness to speak to me and to elicit my comment on whatever subject pretty much turned on a dime in 2016, because in that year, when I was serving in the shadow cabinet of the Green Party of Canada, I brought forward a resolution calling for the party to support the BDS movement, or the BDS tactics, boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel, to bring to an end the oppression of the Palestinian people. And we became the first party in Canadian political history with a presence in the Canadian Parliament to adopt such a resolution. And we did so over the objections, the vociferous objections of the existing leader and also the current leader, Elizabeth May. And so from that moment on, I became known to the Canadian political elite and the Canadian corporate media as a champion of the Palestinian cause. And from that moment on, I became a leper. They didn't want to talk to me anymore. And they've barely acknowledged my existence since then. So that brings me to the war. What happens? About the fourth or fifth day, a colleague of mine in Canada who was aware that I was in Iran said, listen, he sent me an email. He said, I think what you're doing is very important. I've got a list of 230 Canadian reporters. Let's send them a press release, because there's no one or almost no one from the Canadian corporate media in Iran. I don't think there's actually anybody. And so I said to him, okay, that's fine. I wasn't hopeful that this was going to result in any meaningful interactions between me and the Canadian corporate media, but what's the harm? So we put together a press release, and he sent it out to all these people. And almost at the same time, a friend of mine who's pro-Palestinian, a former lifelong civil servant in the Canadian government, who's respected despite his pro-Palestinian activism, he's respected by the corporate media in Canada because he was a lifelong civil servant, and he's moderate in the way that he expresses himself, much more so than I am. And so he sent an email on his own initiative, he copied me on it, to 6 or 7 of the leading personalities of the CBC, the Canadian state broadcaster, saying, look, you know who Dimitri Lascaris is? He's in Iran. He's reporting on the ground. You may want to interview him. So what happened next? Nothing. Butt kiss. Zero. Not a single Canadian media outlet from the corporate world contacted me and asked me to report on what I was seeing. Now, I don't really give a shit about these people giving me exposure. I couldn't care less about that. What I care about is that I had an opportunity to tell Canadians about what is actually going on here, on the ground reporting, and I was quite happy to do it for free. I wasn't paid anything to do this work other than our monetization of our YouTube channel. I paid my own expenses. I wasn't looking for any money from them. I just wanted to have a chance to communicate more broadly what I was seeing in the country, and not a single one of them took up the opportunity to contact me, even just to interview me off the record. Nothing, nada, zero. Meanwhile, I have been interviewed since going to the Strait of Hormuz by a major Japanese media outlet. I just had a 1.5-hour interview with them today. I have an interview set up with a large media organization in India. I have been quoted, and my video of a war crime, evidence of a war crime, has been published by the New York Times and the Washington Post. I'm going to be doing an interview tonight on Greek television. I've already done an interview a voice interview with a Greek television station. I have been contacted as well by multiple media organizations in the Arab and Muslim world. And yet, in my country, in the country in which I am best known, where the Canadian corporate media have a lengthy, awareness of my activities and many interactions with me over the period of, more than a decade, there has been absolute silence, which just goes to show what a disgusting, putrid cabal of prostitutes the Canadian corporate media are. I mean, these people, they couldn't tell a scoop if it walked up and slapped them in the face. They are cowardly in every sense of the word, and the more I learn of them, the more contempt I have for them, frankly, and the more embarrassed I am to be a Canadian, because this is a very important institution to this very day in Canada that continues to exercise, sadly, significant influence over the Canadian population. Anyways, one other word I want to say about Canadian politics before signing off. Avi Lewis has won the leadership of the New Democratic Party of Canada. Some of you may have heard of Avi Lewis before. Many of you will have heard of Avi Lewis. He is a documentary filmmaker. I think one of his most important works was This Changes Everything. He is the spouse of Naomi Klein. His father was a respected figure in social democratic politics in Canada. He has won the leadership of the NDP, and by a wide margin, I might add. I know Avi personally, not particularly well, but I do know him personally and have spoken to him in the past. And I allowed my membership in the Green Party of Canada to lapse months ago because I was so appalled by its support for the war machine and Elizabeth May's constant compromises. And, once Eve Engler was excluded from the race, a friend of mine, a fierce voice for anti-imperialism and social justice in this country, he was excluded unjustly from the race. But at that point, I decided, what the hell, I'm going to join the NDP and vote for Avi. Because Avi, I think, at this stage is the best hope we have in Canadian politics. I wish Avi well. I hope very much that Avi will be true to his principles. But I think the acid test is going to be whether Avi Lewis will come out strongly and unequivocally against NATO, against the NATO proxy wars, including in Ukraine. I know he is a passionate supporter of the Palestinian cause, and he deserves kudos for that. But it's all one big war machine, Avi. You can't really oppose what is being done in Palestine without opposing NATO, without opposing the Ukraine war, without opposing the military-industrial complex, and without opposing this criminal war of aggression on Iran. So, my friend, if you're listening, buckle up, prepare for the flak, but be true to your principles and stand against the war machine. I have no doubt that you will be rewarded handsomely for this by people of conscience in Canada, rewarded politically, I mean, with their support and their admiration. And if by any chance Avi goes astray and does what every NDP leader of my lifetime has done, and that is sell out, well, sadly, I'm going to have to take up the task of calling him out on it. And let us hope that that doesn't happen. Avi, you're a better man than that. Please prove it to us. With that, I'm signing off today, my friends, and the next time you hear from Reason to Resist, it'll be our final report from Iran, and then we'll be reporting on the ground about the nefarious activities of the U.S. military in the Eastern Mediterranean. Signing off today on April 3rd, 2026.